getting food and settling in. We're gonna, as we're noting, kind of jump straight into the topics, but a quick few announcements first. Just a reminder that we have table tennis today and tomorrow. If you haven't signed up, there are potentially a few slots open because we had a few people drop out. So my recommendation is pop on the form and we can send you an email if you are ready to come out here and flex your ping pong skills. Next week we'll have financial fitness with Susan McGinty. I highly recommend you attend that one. It's at the same time every Tuesday. You guys get the grip, you know how this cadence is going. If you aren't familiar with the U of I Credit Union, I highly recommend you do so, and this is a great way to do it. Don't forget to sign up and register well in advance. What do we do here? We register how many days in advance? A little bit of feedback. As many as you can, that's right. Yeah, great, thanks guys, you're doing it. So please go ahead, register so we can get an accurate count. We're looking to have over 100 people. That is June 26th. Hackathon is on July 1st. Again, we want you to register early. Go ahead and register with your friends and your teams. If you do it faster, I will actually have food with you. If not, I'll make you sit and wait. Lastly, July 2nd, we have a blood drive. Come donate blood. It only takes 15 minutes, and you get a juice box. We all love juice boxes. To get into today's session, I'd like to introduce our two hosts, Dr. Jean Drasgow. Go, I'm so bad at that.
It's okay.
Drasgow. I knew it, so there look, I was like, I did it. She's the Senior Director of Experiential Learning and the Director of Career Services for the College of ACES, and in her role, she oversees the career development of over 32 undergraduate and graduate students. Joining her is Paul Stoddard. I already did it. He is a senior lecturer in the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Economics. Over 10,000 students have been enrolled in Paul's courses since 2001, and he's been recognized for 43 consecutive semesters and the U of I's list of teachers ranked excellent. They have a huge, long history, but I'll let them talk about it. Please applaud for our host.
Absolutely. You make me nervous if you've got too long. So thank you for inviting us back, Brian. I guess we didn't do too bad last year. But Paul and I have been co-doing this presentation for a little bit now, right? And so it's something I look forward to. It's also something I'm very passionate about because I think we all need to know how to articulate our value and our worth in a way that people appreciate and it doesn't turn out to be a negative experience. So hopefully you'll gain a lot today. I'm going to let Paul start this thing.
Absolutely. You have an extraordinary opportunity to make an impact on all of the rest of your career if you do well in negotiating your first job offer and lots of things after that. So first of all, what's negotiable? Almost everything. Many more things in life than you may imagine. You probably know that people negotiate for houses and cars, and maybe you do they negotiate for jobs. Almost everything is negotiable. I negotiated the last time my wife and I got a bottle washer and dryer. Saved a total of $90. I negotiated with my wife and I bought a stove microwave combination. Got $225 off. I negotiated when I bought my lawnmower. There are lots and lots of things that can be negotiated, and it's a little bit surprising, and very often that may be your question on your mind, and the answer is almost always no. There are a few cases where somebody won't negotiate, but they'll usually tell you that politely and go about their way. There are a few companies, for example, that won't negotiate with first-time hires. After that, almost every situation is negotiable. Number 3, negotiation is a learned behavior. Raise your hand if you know how to ride a bicycle. Okay, raise your hand if you were born knowing how to ride a bicycle. Okay, I deduce. If I ever get a hand go up, I'm going to tell them to report directly to the Guinness Book of World Records. That'd be pretty extraordinary. But I deduce, therefore, that you learned how to ride a bicycle. And once you learn how to ride a bicycle, it's not that hard. You don't have to think about it when you do it again. So it's like everything else. You can learn to do it. There's a lot of ways to do that. The reason why you should learn to be a better negotiator, think about the total cumulative impact on your financial life if you paid a little bit less every time you bought anything. Most of you will be buying things for another 70 years. Think about if you got a little more every time you sold something, including your labor, for the rest of your life. Every time you rented an apartment, every time you borrow, every time you save, every time you invest. If you do just a little bit better, and we're going to talk about your starting salary, and that's tremendously important because throughout your career, that base salary is the number on which your bonus is paid, your 401k match is paid, your raise is a percentage of that number. You want to do everything you can to drive that number up as fast as possible. And then I hope you've all had some exposure to the time value of money. The net effect of this over time is greater than what your intuition tells you. Your intuition tells you that those numbers should go up as a straight line, and they're not. They're a curve. It's a pretty cool curve, and I'm sure you'll be exposed to that. How to become a better negotiator. You could take a class like this one. Currently restricted to College of ACES only, but as we get closer to the beginning of the semester, depending on enrollment, often we open it up to other students. And then also BADM 314. So 221 is the second 8 weeks of the spring and fall semesters. It's a hybrid offering. We only meet once per week, so it's 7 consecutive Mondays. BADM 314 is a full semester. It's 3 hours, and gets a lot more into the business negotiation. Examples, international peace treaties, more complex union negotiations, for example, if that was a way that you would want to go instead. But this is something you could teach yourself, and you should try to do that if you don't have another means. But like many things, you're probably going to get a fuller, more rounded approach to the topic if you enroll in a class.
Okay.
Forgot which part I have to practice.
All right, well, this first slide is to remind us that before you negotiate for your salary for a new job, you need to have something important in hand. And if you look at the slide, you might have the hint. So when do you negotiate a job offer? Yeah, go ahead.
Once you have the offer.
Yes, 100%. Don't negotiate until you actually get the offer.
And I just want to interject here. It's enormously important that you never be the one to bring up money. Do not ever ask, and do not ever bring up money until you hear a dollar amount from them, which they will say after they say the words, "We'd like to offer you this job, and the salary is," and then you do from there. To bring up money ahead of. So my path to academia is different than most of the professors. I come out of the 35 years in the agribusiness world. I've hired people. I've been talking to lots of people, hired people. This is a giant turnoff if you're the one that brings up money. You have to act like you don't care. I know that you care, but act like you don't care until you hear a number from them.
Good advice. Okay, so I learn better by hearing stories. So we're going to have a thread going throughout this presentation about these 3 graduate students. They are real life people. We're adjusting some things so you wouldn't be able to identify them. But I think you'll learn some things today, and I want to make sure that at the end of this, when we get done, you'll be able to tell me the advice you would give these 3 students. So the first one, these 3 students are all getting their master's degree, and they all have offers from the same company, and they all have 3 different educational backgrounds before they got their master's. Okay, so just kind of keep those facts in mind as we go along. And my question to you at the end of this session is who should negotiate? Okay, so that's your little quiz at the end of the session. All right, another story, because I need stories to remember things. Can we all agree that that's an orange up there? Okay, so I have 2 siblings in my story, and they both want the orange. There's only one orange. They need to go get groceries. One of them wants to make orange juice, and one of them wants to make cranberry orange bread, of which you need the zest of an orange. Does everybody know what zest is? We know what zest is.
I did not. You had to explain it to me.
It's okay, Bob. We still love you. All right, so how do you guys think they could resolve this without hurting each other? How can they resolve this in a positive way? Any ideas? Morgan?
One of them gets the zest and the other one gets the juice.
Yes, but how do they get to that point?
Take the zest and juice and orange.
They need to communicate, right? They need to say, hey, I need the zest for X. And the other one says, I need the juice for Y, right? If they don't communicate, they're not going to know. They're just going to say, orange, I need it, I want it, it's mine, right? Same with salary negotiation. Or, new hire. I want the job, I need it, it's mine. But at what price point, right? So you need to communicate what your needs are so that the other person can see how they can help you. Okay? So it's a win-win if you can communicate. And we're just going to talk to you today about how to do it in a nice way. Which goes along with themes, I think, from the last 2 weeks, right? Okay, so one of the first things you need to think about is what's important to you. What are you actually negotiating? Because sometimes it's salary, and sometimes it's just start date. Okay? So like last year, I had a student who has put off visiting a lot of family members because he's been very dedicated to his, schooling and doing study abroads and working. And so he really hasn't visited his family for a long time. And they live in different parts of the country. And he's like, do you think I can ask for a month before I start? I was like, that's important to you. Yes, absolutely. Ask before you accept, right? So think about what's important. It may be something like you have a family member getting married and you want to be able to go to the wedding. And they say if you start May 31st, you don't get vacation accrual until 90 days later. It's something you need to talk about before you start. They're much more willing to work with you before you say yes. You might want to think about educational opportunities, or organizing a flexible schedule, or just getting some help from relocating and things like that, okay?
I just want to interject on the flexible schedule. The mood has changed in the corporate world, and a lot more companies are requiring employees to be back at the office. So it is completely fine to ask, but you want to be careful and choose your words carefully so it doesn't sound like you want to work as little as possible. You want to find out what the culture is and ask what the norms are in terms of days in the office, days out of the office. But you want to be real careful about that. Even Zoom, the company that made work from home possible, has required employees to come back to the office. So most companies require at least some in-office days.
And again, it goes back to the communication piece, asking about, I see that you guys really value employee whatever, and employee quality of life. What does that mean to you? How does that look? What could it look like for me? Okay? All right, so just to summarize, we want to figure out what's important to you, okay? Everybody's going to have a different list, or they may have very different lists. Sometimes it's salary, okay? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's flexibility. So just think about that. And then the next thing you think about is, okay, what is negotiable? And I'm just going to go through a quick list because I think this helps you refresh your mind, okay? Anyone want to guess what the number one thing people negotiate is for this situation, for jobs? Yeah, go ahead.
Salary?
Salary, yeah. Salary, sign of bonus, start date, vacation paid time off. Sometimes that's negotiable. That's usually if you're a little bit more senior, because you're used to 3 weeks of vacation. You want to start with a new company and only get one. So that's something that as you mature in your career, you may have that opportunity to negotiate that. Some people do remote work, hoteling, officing. Again, as Paul said, there's a little bit of change in the market with this. Flexibility, start times. Like you might be able to flex and start at 7 and leave at 4 or something like that. So some of that's flexible. Hours per week, some people do more hours one week and less the next. And then just perks. Some of our students actually get trucks to drive around cornfields, and that's a perk, right?
Company cars, laptops, phones,
Yep.
that kind of thing.
Yep. And et cetera. Okay? All right, this is where we're going to get into the fun part. And this is where you probably haven't had this conversation before unless you're in human resources or compensation. So we're going to dive into this. This is one of the better things we're going to talk about today. Okay. So on the y-axis of this little graph, we have annual salary. And I'm just going to buzz through these here. And then on the x-axis, we're going to have different grades, okay? And we as employees are put into these different salary grades based on our tenure, our skills, education level. We fall into these grades, all right? And each of these grades have what we call a salary range, all right? And do you notice at the end, like the higher the grade is, the bigger the range? Okay? So that's like, you get more leeway because by that stage of the game, you're bringing a bunch of different things in your toolkit. And so they need more range as an HR professional to hire you. But if you're down here in grade 1 or grade 2, what do you see? Is it a broad range or a narrower range? Narrower, okay. So this is probably something I want you to keep in your head, right? If you're a new hire, I think what your goal is not to necessarily prove your value in grade 1, but to get yourself over to grade 2 as fast as possible because your grade goes higher. Does that make sense? So understanding what can you do as an employee within a short amount of time to get up the grades that will help you get more salary overall.
So if you're motivated by compensation, you need to get promoted as soon as possible. That's the key moving up. What happens otherwise, if you stay in the same job role and don't get promoted, eventually you're bumping up against the top of your band. And they can't give you a raise. So your manager is given a budget, knows how much they can spend. But if you're at the top of grade 3, so we'll call that maybe 77,000, and you've done a great job. If you're doing, and their angle on this, and I would agree with them, when you're doing the same job you're already doing, why should you get more money for the same work? And so the key then, and if you'll click, it'll show different, very often there are, these are promotions that you might find: sales assistant, sales associate, sales specialist, senior sales specialist, assistant sales manager, sales manager, additional skills, additional duties, and very often you might be managing other people as well. So if you're motivated by money, not everybody is, but if you are, you want to find out, what do I need to do to get promoted as soon as possible? Extra skills, extra responsibility to get extra money.
So just a little tip for those of you who will be on the job market, a lot of these organizations offer leadership development programs where you might come in on a grade 1, but because you have these like rotational programs in different units, it fast tracks you, maybe even bumps you sometimes to a grade 3. Does that make sense? So look for those opportunities if that's a good fit for you, because they are a very proven fast track way to get up the salary scale quicker. Okay? All right. Does anybody know what a cost of living index is? Why did we lose it? Yeah, it's back. Okay. Anybody know about those? Let me go back a second. Cost of living index. Somebody saying yes. So do you want to share with us what you think it is?
Let's put this in a different context. How many of you grew up in a major metropolitan area? And if you do, how many of you think that Champaign Urbana seems like a relatively inexpensive place to live? If you fancy it.
Okay, sorry about that. It's been a little goofy. So it's based on your relative price, a cost to live someplace. So like food product costs, housing costs, all these other factors that go into living in these different areas. And so, but the point of that is that what you're paying to live someplace is not going to be the same in every location that you're in. So we have a couple different options in the slides here, and I'm going to like put stuff down and just go online and kind of give you a couple examples if we have time. You can do them.
Yeah, so the whole point here is it's enormously important that your salary matches the cost of living. So what might seem like a great salary if you have only lived in Central Illinois your whole life, if you end up in so I go to San Francisco a lot, I've got relatives in the East Bay, Berkeley area, so I travel there frequently, been doing that for several decades. Everything costs more. McDonald's costs more. Gas costs more. Pencils cost more. Housing is absurd. Everything is a lot more expensive, so you need a much better salary to be proportionate to that. Because what you're really interested in is the living that you can afford to buy, your effective purchasing salary.
All right, unfortunately you guys aren't able to see what I'm seeing because I'm on a cost of living calculator. And we can, as we're waiting for Sabrina to save us, we're going to just kind of let you pick a city that you could be going from and going to, so you can kind of get a real life estimation. Thank you for helping me. Anybody have a city they'd like to pick?
Austin.
Austin? I assume it's Texas? Awesome. And where do you want to go to?
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Really? Okay. Tulsa,
You're
Stillwater.
Tulsa.
Tulsa? Okay. Sorry to my Oklahoma friends. Sorry, Brian. Okay. It didn't switch. That's so mean of it. Okay. Tulsa. All right. Anybody want to guess before we get there?
Cheaper?
You think it's going to be cheaper to live in Tulsa? I think I would agree with that. Is that common consensus? You are right. If you are making $100,000 in Tulsa, you're going to need to make 95 sorry, 100 grand in Austin, you can make 95 in Tulsa, okay? All right, so this is helpful. We can even try Champaign if you want it. I think it's in here. Yep, it is, good old Champaign. Let's try, you wanna try New York City? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Manhattan?
Queen.
What do you think it's going to be? Somebody give a guess. 200.
Okay, ready?
140.
244. The rent is very high in New York City. Okay, because of time, we're gonna keep going, but you guys get the gist, right? So when you get a salary offer, what would be important to know from the employer? The location, right? Yeah, the location. Yes, go ahead.
Is your rent fee about 130? Sorry, rent fee 130, your monthly salary still follow?
That's a really great question, and I'm not sure. I've always done the 28%. Maybe it's 1/3 now. Is
I
that
think a quarter to a third someplace along
Yeah.
there.
a range? That's what but I'm not a financial person, so maybe Craig will want to.
But for a quarter of your housing cost in Urbana, if you're in New York City, you'll get an apartment about the size of this table. And it'll be a 4 place share. The former TA of mine moved to New York City for a job at Rabobank and actually had to leave his couch. He abandoned his couch on the sidewalk because he had to go up 4 flights of stairs, he had to turn multiple times, and his couch wouldn't fit, so he just walked away.
That's a great question to ask next week.
I love that. Okay, next week, that's a plug. You gotta come back, okay? Because of time, I'm gonna rush just a titch. However, we have a wonderful resource for every student in the university, and it is the Illini Success Data. And if you get the chance, you can kind of look it up by your college, but you can kind of see, I think Sabrina told me she was an operations management graduate, right, Sabrina? And so the average salary for one of those graduates is $67,000, okay? And a key to negotiating is understanding what your peers are getting, okay? And then the other key is understanding like the job title that you're getting, what's the range for that job title. Does that make sense? So start getting data, get the information, and we kind of use this as like understanding your value or your worth, not your worth to your parents or to your beloved teachers, but your worth in terms of market value as a worker, okay? So these are good resources. If you're in ACES, like Morgan and Mira, we have based on our concentrations and majors as well.
Yep, we got a question?
Yes.
Do you think employers pay like proportionately more, like let's say we compare Champaign Urbana to New York, right? 100,000 versus 244. Do you think like they will actually pay that much more?
In many cases, businesses do adjust this because they know the cost of living is higher and they know that people know about this and they know that they can't get good people if they don't. The reverse of that, which was really intriguing and not in a good way, is during COVID, when many people left Silicon Valley, for example, and went to Boise, Idaho. Then some of the employers in Silicon Valley said, well, you're living someplace cheaper, we're going to pay you less. In many cases, a lot of those are the same people who decided to come back to Silicon Valley. But yeah, that works both ways.
Yeah.
In general, it tends to be correlated, but you need to check that on your own and find out for sure.
And that's a wonderful segue to this next slide, because we do know some organizations do not negotiate for entry-level employees. So that's something to try to use your alumni network to kind of find out, like, hey, I see that you're working for this other company, and will they move on salary? That's something to get advice from, for sure. Or your instructors at fall. All right, so let's go back to our case scenario, because I want to make sure you guys keep thinking about that, all right? So we mentioned that these 3 students are working for the same company, and they have 3 different educational backgrounds, okay? And keep going. These are the different backgrounds that they have. Person A has also an MBA. Person B is only getting a master's in human resources, and person C has a law degree, and in addition to getting their master's in HR. Okay, so they're all 3, same job title, same company, 3 different backgrounds. Any questions so far? No? Okay, so this is what they got offered. Can anybody answer that?
C.
C? Okay, anybody else have any opinions? Yes, you've been paying attention, good job. C is correct as well, but even a better answer is all of them, so thank you. Okay. And when Paul told you why, right? Now, this might take a little bit more time, but maybe we should just roll because we're running close. Okay, so in your head, briefly, think about how each of these people could negotiate if we just said that they all should. All right, so what would be a reason that person C could give since you think that they should get more? What would be a reason?
They have their JD as well.
HR person, right? Okay, that's fair. I like that. Anybody have anything for A or B? Yeah.
I think person A can also negotiate up because the MBA degree is very valuable.
Okay.
And it usually signifies that you've been in the workforce for at least 5 to 7 years after getting the degree.
It could be. It could indicate that you have a stronger sense of the business that they're in as well, right? So you can understand it more deeply. Okay, now we just talked about cost of living index, right? We talked about location. Do you think we might have a reason that they could negotiate?
Yeah.
We just don't know it maybe, right? Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, no, if they're in New York, then
They were. Good answer. So, person A and B were located in New York, but that's our secret. And we're just giving you the simple cost of living index of 100. C was located in a different area with a cost of living index of 76. Okay? So should C still negotiate?
yeah.
Good answer. You guys are getting it. Okay. So you need to just frame it based on what the situation is for you. Okay? And obviously use it to your advantage. Okay? All right. Now we're going to talk about how do you negotiate. Okay? So we talked about this earlier. What's on your list, right? You can maybe just have one thing. Like you really want a high salary, but you may have start date, you may have flexible schedule, and you may have salary. Who knows? Whatever it is for you, prioritize it. And then make sure, remember the orange example, make sure that the employer understands what those desires are. And then asking in a way that's pleasant, like, is there anything you could do? Jen just earlier told me that her brother-in-law's an HR, is that right? And he always said that he would grab a compliment to the organization in some way and shape it to say, I understand that you're really whatever.
I agree completely on this. I
Yes.
would put this in terms of that you're a fantastic company. I think I'm an ideal fit for this role. I'd really love to go to work for a company like this. And then you want to be clear. You want to be sure that you need to think about how it appears to them, not how you're expressing it. You want to come across as you're asking. You're not in a position to demand. You are in a position to ask, and you should. And very often I've had students that could give no reason why they should get more and got a little more. Sometimes $2,000 or $3,000 just by asking. Sometimes as simple as, well, my friends all have received offers that are higher than this. What's that got to do with anything? Very often, and you'd be surprised how powerful this could be. This last semester, I talked one-on-one with 3 students. One got 5,000 more, one got 7,000 more, and one got 10,000 more. And some of these have master's degrees, but this is just like a car lot. You go to a car lot in North Cunningham and ask them what's your best price. What they tell you is not their best price. The recruiter leaves and goes looking for people. They have a job to do. They have a need. They need to come back to the mothership, whether it is, maybe it's Moline if it's John Deere, with a certain number of recruits. And they have a budget, and if the people Purdue probably didn't ask for more, so there's some money there that you could ask for.
We love our friends in Purdue. We're not bashing Purdue.
Let's just say you got multiple offers in a competitive industry. Should you bring up if the other company's baseline salary is higher than that, especially if they're competing companies?
Yeah, so this is a fine line. You want to be careful on this. I'll let you respond first, Jean.
I think that that's a fair thing to do, but I would hold it a little bit close to your chest in terms of like exact details. I would start off with saying, I really appreciate this offer. I have a lot to consider. I do want you to know that I have 2 other offers. and their baseline is, whatever you want to tell them, higher percentage or whatever level, but you want to explain to them what it is. And they may ask you more, or they may say, I'm sorry, this is our firm start. But yeah, I think it's fair.
You want to be really careful because you might have 3 offers, and one of them might be in Anchorage, Alaska, and that's the last place you want to go. So you don't want to play it where you end up, your only thing left is to go to Anchorage, Alaska. So you want to think about what you really want. And it never hurts to ask, it never hurts to say that. I would never, ever want you to imply that you have another offer if you don't.
Absolutely.
Because
Never.
they might say, well, go do that. Thanks for talking to us. Have a great day.
Do companies verify if you're not lying about
No, I don't think they would have any way to do that because they have to get information of their competitors. But you have to assume they've got a pretty good idea of what other people in the industry are paying. They're all watching each other constantly.
Yeah, and on the surface, no, but most of the recruiters have gone to school with the other people. There may be like a little coffee chat going, hey, you like this candidate? I understand you do too. Who knows?
What's the likeliness you negotiate with your recruiter, you talk about your other offer, and then they rescind? Or like negotiate too hard, you push too hard, then they rescind your offer.
What's the likelihood? I don't have any stats on it.
Not like
I can,
but like is that?
I can tell you that in my 12 years here, I've had one student that had an offer rescinded. And it was not a good organization. Does that make sense? But it is true, it can happen. And I would say I know that person did everything appropriately. It was nothing about him. So, yeah.
I guess that leads into my question, like, when do you stop negotiating? Like, when is like,
So I think that it's important never to negotiate for the sake of negotiation because you'll be known as the person who does that. So you need to think about the fact that whomever you're negotiating with, probably somebody from HR, you should assume the people you work with are going to hear exactly how this went. They might literally listen to a recording of the phone call. So the way I would do it, if you get one big concession, say they offer you 62 and you say I was really hoping to have more, average starting salary for grads with my qualifications and the 3 internships I've had, I thought that this might be something closer to 70 and they come back at 68, I would say thank you very much, I accept.
I'm glad you asked that though, because I did have a student who I think listened so well at one of our presentations, he would not let this negotiation thing go. And he had everything. He had a manager he knew and liked. He was going to have broad, diverse projects so that he could learn, like explore more about what type of engineering he wanted to do. He had a salary above average for somebody with his degree and credentials. It was in a location with a low cost of living index, and he was going to have a lot of responsibility because it was more of a regional firm versus a large firm where he would just be a peon. Every single bucket that he told me was valuable to him, that he prioritized, it was met. And I'm like, what are you trying to do? He goes, well, I just want to delay my acceptance. And he wanted to delay it over winter break when he actually was going to be gone on a study abroad. And I was so confused because I was like, how are you going to negotiate when you're studying abroad? Because like, you're in a different country, But it was just such an odd thing that I haven't been able to unpack that one. So I don't know what was holding him back. And maybe he couldn't even articulate it. I don't know what it was. But I still wonder what happened to it because I was like, dude, if it were me, I'd tell my kid, take it. Morgan was first, I think.
So, you said not to bring up money first. What do you do if they ask what you're like, hoping to get? Because that's always a weird thing, especially if you don't know what is.
So the question is, what if they ask you what your salary expectations are, which is a more common question, I think, and that's where it's so important that you do your homework ahead of time. So in any negotiation, what you do ahead of time is enormously important. And you should have an answer ready for that. And for example, Morgan's from the College of Aces. I would say, and you're in ACE, right?
I'm Alec.
Okay, let's pretend you're an ACE.
Okay.
In which case you say the average starting salary for somebody my major in the last 3 years is $65,300. I feel like I'm a better than average student because I've had 2 internships, including one at Research Park. And I was president of the club and other things that you've done. And so I was expecting it would be someplace near the top of the range. I'm told the range for my department is between 62 and 71. And then kind of leave it there. and it's realistic for you to hope to be in the top of that range, and you want to stay out of the bottom third of that range on any negotiation. You really define the range correctly, you want to stay out of that bottom third.
And some key things that he's pointing out is that you know what the job title salary is roughly around. You can find those things on Glassdoor and things like that. But also he anchored it with what people in your major were getting paid, okay? And then he also gave you he gave you the value proposition of why you are worthy of this higher amount, right? So maybe you're part of the student leadership council, or you have had leadership experience, or whatever it is, but make sure you anchor all these points with things that make you a better candidate than others. That make sense?
And so you need to consciously build your resume. If you've not started that, you need to start that today. You need to do as many things on that page as possible. There are things you can do, such as the Illinois Leadership Center.
Yeah.
You can go take a one-day seminar that you could list on your resume. You can do volunteer activities. Whatever it is, you want a well-rounded resume. Employers are looking for students who have done more than simply sit successfully in the classroom for 4 years. The university spits out about 7,000 people who could be described that way. You need to distinguish yourself from the other 6,999.
Real quick, how much?
I guess my question following up from that is that whether it would be an appropriate strategy to kind of stretch it a bit more than usual, because when you offer something that seems kind of out of the ordinary, and then they instead settle for something that's a little bit less than that, but that's actually way more than what you really expect. So I was just wondering if that's
Yeah, so the question is about stretching it. That kind of comes down to a personal decision. I would say you should never say anything that isn't true. On the other hand, it's your job, you're selling yourself. You should point out your strengths more than your weaknesses and put a nice gloss on it, but be careful about saying anything that is simply not true.
You want to anchor it in fact, because they can't deny fact. They can deny fiction, right? And so if you say the Illini Success Survey shows that people with my major earn this amount, that's one good way. Or, according to Glassdoor, this job range is this. Okay, and use one that makes better sense for you. Okay. All right, because of time, we're gonna hustle, all right? So this kind of goes along with what you were asking though. It's about the range, and you want to calculate a stretch because you want to make sure that there's room for them to kind of fall within it. That's sort of like, I think what you were alluding to is that, what's the stretch amount, okay? And you need to figure out at what point is this opportunity not going to work for me. Maybe the cost of living index is so high that I can't live in Southern California for $50,000 a year. I just can't make it work, right? So figure that out as well.
And so you do think about your plan B, whatever that may be. Maybe it's going to grad school instead. Maybe it's some job that pays a little bit better, is a location you don't want to live in. But you need to think, if I don't accept this, what's my alternative? And there should be a walk-away point. Somebody offers you 30 grand, don't take it. 40 grand, don't take it. I don't know what the right number, I don't know where I quit that is, but you need to think about that for yourself.
If you're living in Thailand, you're teaching English as a second language, and your cost of living expense is less than that, you can do that. No. Okay, just joking. All right, so just real quick, resistance point is where you decide to leave the deal. Okay, that's where you're like, I can't do this. And so this person's range is going to be between 50 and 69,000, and then you have to kind of hit your target point, like where would you be happy? Okay, where is it that you land that if they offer you this, you can be done negotiating? Okay. And then we're going to jump into value statements super quick. So you want to summarize your skills and accomplishments, which Paul kind of demonstrated already. We'll give you another example. I accomplished whatever you accomplished using my blank skill, which benefited our company by blah, blah, blah. All right? So you guys can fill in the blanks based on your discipline, but does that kind of make sense? It gives you the language of how to shape it. And also when you're negotiating, and I know you guys don't like this as a resistance point, but you might want to make this one a phone call, not an email, not a text. Even better if you can do it in person.
So I see some head nodding, so you've heard, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing. The old people of the world want you to be comfortable talking on the phone. So I encourage you to practice that. I had a lengthy conversation at a wedding rehearsal dinner on Friday night with a recent grad who's been out maybe 10 years, trades bonds, for a company in St. Louis, and the big problem they have in terms of recruiting people is finding people who are comfortable talking on the phone. He said, I talk on the phone all day long, and we need people who are comfortable doing that. So, and then the other thing on communication, I would always say that you should communicate with people using the same mode that they do. So if they text you, it's fine to text back. If they email, it's fine to email back. But if they call you, don't text them, call them. It feels like you're trying to avoid them. And especially do it right away. I've had that instance where I call somebody, and 30 seconds later, I get a text saying, hey, what's up? I just feel like they just told me they don't want to talk to me. And so, like it or not, in almost every case, you're going to go to work for people who are older than you. And 40 years, maybe this won't matter, but people of my generation expect that. And that's how we're most comfortable communicating, and in many cases, our clients as well. And that's why it's so important to learn to be comfortable doing that.
And tone can be conveyed easier over a phone call than it can in an email. And so I recommend talking to the people. And what you want to do though is make sure you set it up in advance. Like don't just call them out of the blue, just say, hey, can we chat about this at 3 o'clock? Is that a good time? Or whatever time you guys negotiate, okay? And so that way they're prepared to talk, you're prepared to talk. You can be in a quiet room, no distractions. But I think that's the best advice I could give somebody. Okay, so a couple of other things. It's okay to ask an employer, how did you reach this amount? Okay, they may have taken into consideration the cost of living index. It could be a business strategy that they don't adjust their early entry or early career salaries. They just have a flat amount wherever you're sent. If you're sent to Nashville, Tennessee, or Manhattan, New York, or San Francisco, California, they have a set amount, and that is true for a company that I can tell you offline. But yeah, so that's something to think about.
And then some companies, in many cases, will have some kind of bonus. They won't call it a bonus; they'll call it incentive compensation. And sometimes they anticipate that that's a big part of it. As the person being recruited, the counter that I would use, if they say, well, and you're eligible for 15% bonus, I would say, if I was being recruited, well, can I count on that? And of course, they're going to say no. And so sometimes the salary base, I had several students go to work for brokerages, commodities, futures, and the salary sounds a little bit low, but they're eligible for a 20 or 25% bonus that first year, which would get them up in the ballpark where they need to be.
One key, when you are satisfied with negotiations, ask for it in writing, okay? That's super important because you want to have that document in hand, right? With the actual amounts that you agreed on.
And they expect that, and they'll be happy to do that. So maybe they sent you an offer letter that said $58,000, and you agree on 63. They'll send you another offer letter that says 63,000, and you'll sign that and send that back. And they will not be offended. They will not interpret that as that you don't trust them. They want a copy signed by you for their records as well.
Okay, remember when Paul started this talk and he asked you about riding bicycles? And you raised your hand, and then he had said, were you born doing that? How many of you were born negotiating? Anybody? Okay, probably not. So my suggestion is that you participate in the role play. I understand some of you may have to get back to work, but it's a quick little role play. We believe that you'll learn to be make this second nature the more you practice, and this is a friendly group, these are your peers. So Brian and Sabrina are going to pass out one piece of paper.
You need to find a partner, please.
Or a pair. One paper, yes. Sure.
Okay, we have one here with
Hey guys, listen up.
company rep, and for what amount of money did you hire your? 60,000. Any company reps get somebody hired for less than 60? Okay.
Okay. Company reps did your job.
58.
Yeah.
Whoa, we have a winner. If only we had a prize. Maybe Brian
Well,
had a cake in his back pocket or something.
Company rep wins there, but how about negotiating on the student side? Who got the highest?
Job applicant, who thinks they did the best?
64,000.
64.
Everybody better than 64? Ooh, what'd you get? Same, okay, 2 winners?
Excellent.
264s? Good job.
And if we could look inside actual negotiations in the real world, you would see a range like that.
Yeah.
It's just like if you and I both go down to a car dealer and buy exactly the same brand new Toyota Camry, we will not pay the same amount. And it's the same way with the jobs. Please remember that forever. You want to be in the top of that range. That difference between 68 and 64, if you do the math on that, and that base salary, and you work another, many people work another 40, 45 years, and your bonuses compounded on that, and your raise is a part of that, and your 401k match is a part of that. The differences between those two people, 45 years hence, is going to be measured in hundreds of thousands of dollars. And very often the key for negotiation, this is the hard part, is you got to ask. I was raised in a culture and told never to ask. I was taught that that was impolite. It's hard for me to get over that. How many of you feel good about your negotiation? It's a little bit icky sometimes to have to ask, to try and advocate for yourself, to try and say, I'm better than that. But push yourself to do that and it'll pay off.
I feel like, should you feel bad if you're the employer paying them, like, say 64? Like, I don't know, it doesn't come out of my paycheck. Like, I don't know.
Well, that's a good question. Is it going to come out of your paycheck? No, but you probably had some metrics that you were told to abide by. And if you violate those, then in a sense, it's going to, so everybody's got a boss. Everybody's got a boss. Everybody got somebody that they're trying to please.
Okay,
Yeah,
well,
one more question.
Quick question. I know for a lot of companies, when you're negotiating, the recruiter can't actually give you a concrete decision right on the spot, and that they have to relay back to HR. So I was just wondering how this is like an accurate representation of the actual negotiation.
Yeah, so it's common that they may say, I gotta talk to the committee and get back to you. And you have the right to do the same. So it's important when you get that job offer, it's completely reasonable for you to ask, how long do I have to make a decision? It's completely reasonable for you to say, I'd like to talk to my mentors or my professor or my family. This is a big decision. Not just the dollars part, the taking the job part, the town you're going to move to. This is a huge decision. It's completely appropriate that you should have a couple weeks to figure that out. Any company that pressures you otherwise, I would look askance at their posture on that. And the way they treat you during the whole hiring process is a good window into how they treat people, period, including their employees. So occasionally I've had somebody say, you know, at the career fair, they were almost rude or kind of confrontational. So tell you everything you need to know.
so to your question earlier about like how realistic is this, obviously we've condensed it to make it like usable in this terms, but it would be, as Paul was saying, the next step would be, may I have this in writing, and then they would give it to you in writing, and you say, thank you so much for this, how much time do I have to reflect on this, okay? And then because you want to confer, you want to make sure you have everything understood, and it's a big deal. The key is do not accept until you have reflected on it, because we do not want you to accept an offer and then change your mind later. That's just very bad, okay?
Would you like to sign it? Is it appropriate to say like, oh, I need some time to reflect on the conditions?
I think if you, like, usually they'll give it to you in writing, and then you say, you're going to review it, right, and you ask them when do they need it signed. And they usually give you a time. Good question. Did everybody get that? It's okay when they give it to you that you ask when do they need it signed by. All right, I hope you guys, do you feel like you've learned things that you needed to know? Who should negotiate?
Everybody.
And what should you negotiate for?
Man, I don't want to sell these car to you people.
If you are going to get an offer for $100,000 in San Francisco versus in Champaign, which one is the better salary? Okay. If your priority is hiking and wonderful weather and all these other things, where are you going to pick? Champaign. That's your own choice, right? It's your priorities.
You've been wonderful. Thank you very, very much.